It's my great pleasure and indeed honor to introduce our keynote speaker. To explore how the rise of the Global South is disrupting the established order, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the former President of Afghanistan, His Excellency Dr. Hamid Karzai.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ladies and gentlemen, a very great pleasure today to be invited by the TRT to this very distinguished gathering, and on issues of such tremendous relevance to our world, and hopefully to a better functioning of it. Well, for an Afghan, it's always happy and nice to be in Turkey and to be in Istanbul, this lovely city between the two worlds of the East and the West. And to participate in a conference that's discussing transformational processes. But before I go to all of that, ladies and gentlemen, Turkey and Afghanistan have such old relationships. Way back to the 18th century, when Ahmad Shah Abdali, the founder of the modern Afghan state, was seeking advice and consultation, perhaps even permission from the then Ottoman Caliph of the day. And then, nearly a century and a half later, with the emergence of modern Turkey under the leadership of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, and the independence of Afghanistan in 1919, a fundamentally new relationship started between the two countries, between Shah Amanullah and Kemal Atatürk, which saw an unprecedented flourishing of relations between the two countries, where the experts, educational and military from the new Republic of Turkey came to Afghanistan to help the building of the Afghan state, the military institutions, the education institutions, and all that. And this continued right till 2002, when we began this new order in Afghanistan with the help of the international community, of which Turkey was, again, an extremely important component in helping us towards betterment in our country. I remember very well in the initial days when I began to consult with our brothers in Turkey, with leaders, with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who was so kind to help with our peace process and the launch of the tripartite conversations between Afghanistan, Pakistan, under the auspices and leadership of Turkey in Istanbul and in Ankara, God knows how many times, 4, 5, 6 times, that demonstrated the will of Turkey in helping Afghanistan, in ushering in peace, which was so much in our need, and better relations between us and our neighbor, Pakistan. And it is continuing today. But that's just a trickle of this whole relationship. As we all know, this whole ambit, this whole aura of relations between us and Turkey starts way back from Maulana, from Balkh to Konya, and the people of Afghanistan. From that past to today to the future, this relation will flourish and continue. And thus, today, the two countries are natural partners in this changing world towards, I hope, and we all aspire, a better world. So we come to asking ourselves, what do the current geopolitical upheavals mean for us, for this region? What roles do we envisage for ourselves in shaping future geopolitical outcomes in a multipolar world, if you choose to call it that? After all, you will agree that we are witness to a momentous shift of sands, the slow but sure movement of power from the west to east, what we just called the global south, I believe. The term that connotes those countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America who are now seeing themselves finally emerge on the global stage and are gradually becoming stakeholders and not merely spectators in determining their own fates and affecting the rest of the world. This contains many of the answers we seek. These major global disruptions, with the retreating United States of America and the emergence of new centers of power, have led to new reckoning in university classrooms and parliamentary debates and in the boardrooms of enterprises and corporates of these important changes and actors. The very fact that the countries that were formerly referred to as the third world or developing world are now referred to by the new moniker of the multipolar world or the rise of the global south is reflective of this change of power and what it should represent or mean for the future. The end of the Cold War for many of us meant the rise of a new order in which the United States was the undisputed leader, and with the expectations of security and a more harmonious world with it. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Rather, after a short interlude, we saw the images of a multi-centric world appear. This was and remains a critical, instructive development when multipolarity leads to multilateral action among the key powers that shape the world. That's where we hope new seeds of a better world order would appear. So, even as we discuss the merits of the global south, we must remember that this consciousness of a political, empowered entity draws its relevance, indeed, and its existence from the widespread reality of the historical dominance of the North the way it was. The North meaning the West, led by the United States of America. In fact, some believe that the dynamics that have disrupted the unipolar world, in which the United States was seen as taking the leadership role, may lead to a change in the values that at least theoretically defined at the time. I don't think so. I don't think those values will change. I think as we go to the next stages of power politics and of shaping of a multipolar world, the values will universally mainly remain the same, because those are values that we all adhere to as human beings. Now, what led to all of this, to the emergence so quickly of a new order, to the global South rising, to us thinking differently, not in terms of the values that the West set for us? It was because of the wars that the West launched in the rest of the world, especially in the Muslim world. The war on terror, the invasions, the illegal invasions, the very same countries that were responsible for the stewardship of the liberal order of the world violated those very principles on which it was built. Whether it was internationalism, humanitarianism, or indeed sustainable development, let alone liberalism and all that. So this practice of illiberalism by the champions of liberalism is a study without a doubt in hypocrisy. This in me has brought about tremendous change in thinking and in the practice of politics, unfortunately, as we see today. In the name of national interest, powers are allowed to step over everything: humans, values, properties, and lives. And perhaps this is the hypocrisy in all of that that led, with the speed that we saw, to the rise of the global South and the multipolar world, with the momentum and the capitalization of it as we have seen now, and the opportunities that this provides to us on the international level and, of course, at regional levels as well. Well, I'm not going to go into the histories of us as to how we emerged from all of this. Some have a colonial past that they're not happy about. Some have the current economic imperatives and the disputes that it brings about. All of that are contributing factors, reasons for the rise of new powers and for the merger of a hopefully better functioning multipolar world, which would mean for us the practice of fairness and transparency, and that we should harness that, I hope. And for this to happen, a better functioning multipolar world in fairness and in equity, and in the proper resolution of disputes, the changing world order needs the new stewards of this order of the global governance to boldly take charge. Europe is transforming without a doubt and reorienting itself. You see it in the news. Let's not go into the details on that. With several centers of power emerging: China, Russia, India, Brazil, Turkey, and South Africa, as natural leaders in this emerging world order, it behoves, I hope it also becomes imperative in lots of ways for these countries to work cooperatively, then in competition. The difference between this emerging new order and the old one should be in the fact that this order should be cooperative rather than in competition. rather than one against the other, rather than causing conflicts. This is what we hope will be the motto, the principles on which the New World Order will be based on. And there is, I believe, I hope so, immense wisdom in the leaders of the country that I mentioned and in the larger world, and the experiences that we have as legacy to us left from the past and the current injustices and upheavals to lead us to this. So it could be collaborative, mutually accepting, recognizing differences, but still working and basically making it a win-win for all of us, the big powers and the rest of us who may not matter much, but we still can have voices and can contribute. So for a better world, a multipolar world in which we'll have just peace and better prospects for development. It doesn't necessarily have to be with big steps taken forward. Small leaps will lead to that. Cooperation in various areas will eventually lead and will acquire various dimensions. Of these, the most important are the following steps that should lead to that in terms of cooperation and in multi-dimensional aspects. The reform of the international financial institutions, Bretton Woods, as Mr. Nawaz referred to, the IMF and the World Bank. I was in government for 12, 13 years. I know how they functioned. Really, well, in principle, they said they were impartial and they were for the rest of the world, but they actually did work in a manner where the poorer remained poor and the richer remained rich. I hope this is changed. And I hope this is changed not by the sheer facts of the global south arising or the new multipolar world arising, but by the sensibility of the formerly dominant or the currently dominant, if you may call them that, the West as well. So the West and the new rising world, I hope will cooperate in amending these institutions to a better functioning for all of us. And then we come to the United Nations, the Security Council. When this body was created over 70 years ago, there were not as many nations. The world was still living under the tutelage of colonialism and all that. Today, there are fortunately many more independent and free countries who are part of the United Nations. And the structure of the world, and the economics of the world, and the power politics of the world is such that the current Security Council, the membership of it is not just. It's tilted towards the West. Let's hope that this will change. The realization is there. Everybody speaks about the change and the need for change in the Security Council, but someone still trying to prevent it. I think that time is slowly passing away because the recognition is there and the forces are now available politically and economically to bring about this change for a more just, more representative UN Security Council. Geographically, if you want it religious-wise, or if you want to call that cultural-wise, there is this fundamental need for a reform of the Security Council to represent the current global realities. The current global reality is not at all the same as it was when this body was formed. When was it? 1947, 45? When was it? Then. So that needs to come. And of course, there is consensus as well about this change. And let's work that consensus towards becoming a reality. 2. As we discuss a reform in the UN Security Council and the financial institutions, as we discuss the rise of the global south, we also must be mindful as this order begins to emerge responsibility comes with it too. The new powers, I hope, will recognize that the emerging centers of power also need to be careful about how they function themselves into the workings of the world and how they relate themselves to the rest of the world. That this connectivity, this new order of multi-centers or this multi-centric world work together and with the rest of the world in harmony, in real multilateralism, rather than let's call it national interest centerism, if I can use that word. National interest centerism is what got us into the trouble that we are in. Let's go beyond this national interest centerism. It's fine to have national interests. It's all right. We all have national interests, but not at such massive human cost to other people, other nations, other regions. And let's hope that the emerging order has recognized that there is a need for a different functioning, a cooperative functioning in enterprise, in business, in politics, in adjudication of disputes, and all of that. There are mega countries with mega projects. China, Russia, India all have mega projects massively in our part of the world with effects on the rest of the world. Europe is there with its own grand ideas. And then there is BRICS, a combination of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And Turkey as the centerpiece connecting west to the east, and a great example of the Islamic world to which I'll come later on. It is important that these countries begin to think of constructing a new security mechanism whereby local issues are resolved locally, where there is a regional localized mechanism as well that can address issues and remove difficulties that we have. So on a global scale and internationally, we hope this will happen. And ladies and gentlemen, for Turkey, a close brother of ours, in view of the past and its present and the fact that it's a connecting bridge between the East and the West, or the Islam and the rest of the world, I think of no better country that can lead us by example of massive culture, of history, of all that we can aspire to. And I hope that the countries of this region will put aside differences, if any, to work, to serve for the progress and common good of all. This brings me to Afghanistan. My country. After September 11, the people of Afghanistan welcomed the United States and its allies with open arms, with tremendous expectations that we will do better. And we did better in certain areas, for which we are very, very grateful, for the help that the rest of the world gave us, for the help that the United States gave us, for the help that Europe and all others delivered to us, including major powers in our own region and Turkey. We are grateful for that. However, unfortunately, America's stated objective of defeating terrorism did not happen. It faltered. The consequences of that failure are tragic for the Afghan people. Massive human loss. 17 years on, every day we have people killed. Just yesterday we had 26 people killed in eastern Afghanistan in an election rally. And the consequences of that, not only of the Afghan people losing lives daily on a massive scale, but also the further rise of terrorism and extremism and extremist groups. Now we have, in addition to Al-Qaeda, Daesh as well in Afghanistan, which is turning into a menace for us and for the region. All this inability or bad implementation of policy or whatever has really given rise, and many of us, including myself, to ask, is extremism really that the Americans are fighting, or is this a tool in their hands? And the thinking that it may be a tool in their hands is getting ascendancy, is beginning to be believed. This morning, we had the good luck of listening to His Excellency Binali Yildirim, the President of the Parliament of Turkey, and he referred to the United States telling them that in Syria they may be funding certain extremist groups, but that's not part of a strategy. That's just a tactical thing. Oh, come on, how can you do that? And it brings me to my last visit to Washington in 2013 as the president. The next year, in 2014, I retired. We had a dinner with 8 or 9 very senior former and serving senior US officials. Among them was the late Mr. Zbigniew Brzezinski. And I asked him, I said, Mr. Brzezinski, is it true that during the Cold War with the Soviet Union, the United States was supporting extremism as a tool against the former Soviet Union, especially during the years of the Afghan resistance against the invasion of the former Soviet Union? He said, yes, it is true. But I said, how come? How could you do that? Look at the cost. To you and to us, look at September 11, look at the rest of us. He said, that is no cost to us. He said, historically compare, is the defeat of the former Soviet Union more important, or the training and presence of a few extremists around your part of the world or the rest of the world? So, the Honorable Mr. Yildirim's remarks echo very much in my mind, because I've been witness to such conversation, and we have seen it also as it happens in Afghanistan. Given this background and what we know today, the US policy, the US new strategy for Afghanistan has only brought us more destruction, more death. We hope very much that the United States would adopt a method other than war, and would seek cooperation with the region, with big powers in Afghanistan, and would work for peace in Afghanistan. And that is the only possible way for us, the people of Afghanistan, to advance our objectives as a peaceful country, as a sovereign country. And I hope that the United States will show sincerity towards bringing peace to Afghanistan. And I must re-emphasize again, by working cooperatively and collaboratively with other stakeholders, our neighbors, and the region. This brings me to Iraq and the region that has suffered so much. In 2003, the United States said it went to Iraq with good intentions. But look at the consequences. For all the fault of the Iraqi government under Saddam Hussein, it was a stable country. It had institutions, it had a functioning bureaucracy, it had an army. Where are they now? Look at the destruction, look at the loss of life, look at the sectarianism, look at Daesh, look at all that extremism, and then go to Libya, and then go to Syria, and all of that. And the attack the other day on a military parade in Iran reminds me of exactly the same thing in 2008 in Afghanistan on our military parade, exactly the same way. Exactly the same way. Who is doing all of this? Who is it that plans attacks on parades? And only in our part of the world. And only in our part of the world. And look at the attack, the effort to weaken Turkish economy, the attack on the Turkish lira. Who's doing it? Surely there is a foreign hand trying to weaken Turkish lira. And I am witness to this in Afghanistan as well. When I developed differences with the United States of America, when my government developed differences with the United States of America on the way they conducted things in Afghanistan, the same was done against the Afghan economy and banks and currency. But we were too poor for them to affect us. We had nothing that we could lose, so they didn't succeed. Had we been a rich country, we would have been in deep trouble, but we were not. Sometimes poverty becomes a blessing. That is the template that defines the US policy towards the rest of the world, especially our part of the world, the third world or the developing world, or now the global south. Chaos and more chaos. And we are not the only victims. Look at Europe. The arrival of hundreds of thousands of refugees in Europe. The change in the political environment in Europe. That liberal democratic order, because of those refugees, rightly, any country would suffer. Politics have changed, orientations have changed. And the result is that fantastic liberal heritage of Europe is now undergoing a change. Populist governments with the different orientations have emerged and are trying to protect their identity. So we don't blame them. But we ask them that if they don't want refugees to arrive at their doors, they must not cooperate with policies that cause those refugees to go there. From Africa to the Middle East, lives were destroyed, homes destroyed, people killed, millions made refugees, and naturally some of them find ways to the neighborhood. Neighborhood is Europe. Therefore, it is upon Europe and us together to work together for a better future as part of this changing global order. I'm trying to cut it short. Well, you see, the new world order as it emerges, as I mentioned earlier, brings also responsibilities. Responsibilities and with it the means to resolve issues and disputes. This order is in the process of being tested, the emerging order, in various parts of the world. But perhaps among the major grounds of this testing of the New World Order, or the rise of the global south, or the New World Order, or multipolar world, or multicentric world, whatever we choose to call it, one of the testing grounds for this is the situation in Afghanistan. We hope that some of these major powers of the new order who are in our part of the world, China, Russia, India, Turkey, can work together and apply the means to bring peace and stability to Afghanistan. This is a test. When you claim a position, with it comes responsibility. With that comes expectations from others. We, the Afghan people, expect that this new world order, in the form of these major countries, will join hands to bring peace to Afghanistan. and address the issues as they need to. And we also hope that the United States and Europe will join hands, will not shy away. It isn't a defeat for them if they cooperate. The defeat will come, certainly, as it has already been seen, if they don't cooperate, the Americans. So I hope they will begin to cooperate with these major powers of China, Russia, and India, and Turkey to bring peace to Afghanistan. And I also hope that America will cooperate with another major neighbor of Afghanistan, Iran. You can't settle things in Afghanistan, the United States, if you're not on friendly terms with Iran. If you want to help Afghanistan, be good with our neighbors. That's common sense. And of course, our neighbor Pakistan, with those people we have tremendous brotherly relations. We've both suffered. And we have both suffered at the hands of bad policy. For decades, that unfortunately the government of Pakistan enacted and undertook, which caused them to suffer and causing us to suffer as well. That we hope they will come to understand and launch a new path, a new life with us. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us band together to shape this new world order. Let's create a new geopolitics of cooperation rather than competition. And let us hope that the United States and some of its allies will cooperate with this new order and not compete with it. And let us ask too, the rising South, see to it that we don't go ahead in competition with the former world or the older world or the old world order. Let's be wiser on all fronts and let's get it right for the rest of us in this world. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Very kind. Thank you.